Hello there, and welcome to another lesson in mathematics. In our last lesson, we were looking at the simple interest concept. We defined simple interest. We looked at the simple interest formula and its components. We went as far as looking at the application of the same formula. We did some calculations. But in this lesson, we want to look at some mode of payments, because you remember in our previous lesson, we said that the interest, that is simple interest, is that amount that is accrued on a loan or an investment in a given duration that we call the period. So at the end of that period, we would like to know, how do we make the repayments? So in this lesson, that is what we are going to deal with in totality. So we want to look at calculating repayments with simple interest. Calculating repayments with simple interest. In this lesson, we want to look at how repayments are made. And when we talk about repayments, we can have two classifications of these repayments. The first classification is whereby you make a cash payment. At the end of the duration, you make a cash deposit of the same amount that you were loaned, or if it is an investment, it is given back to you with the interest in one installment, just at once, a cash repayment. So I'm saying in these repayments, we have two classifications. The first one, we can have cash repayment, cash repayment. And the second category, we can have the hire purchase. We can have the hire purchase. Hire purchase repayment. Now in this second category, we can also have two classifications, whereby the first category is where we have a deposit being made, followed by installments, You make a deposit of a certain amount from the principal, then the remaining amount is repaid in installments after an agreed period of time, maybe monthly. At the end of the month, you make a certain installment. Another month, you make another installment. And these installments can be of equal amounts, so that after an agreed duration of time, you discover that you have made the entire repayment. Or we can also have another classification where we only have installments. We make repayments based on installments only. The first month you make the first installment, the second month, the third month, up to the last month as earlier agreed. Basically, since we are looking at repayments, we can just move on to examples that will help us to internalize these two methods of repayments using the simple interest concept. The first example is an amount of $3,000 is borrowed. Is borrowed at 12%. Per annum, simple interest, for 2 years. The first part of this question is, what is the total amount owed after the 2 years? This, we are still looking at the simple interest concept, and in this case we have been given an amount that was borrowed, which is $3,000. This is our principal. This amount is borrowed at a simple interest rate of 12% per year, and the duration is 2 years. So the first part of this question requires us to know the total amount that will be owed after the duration of 2 years has elapsed. As we had covered in our previous lesson, there are some things that we need to look at before we answer these questions. And the first thing that we agreed was that we needed to identify the provided components of the simple interest formula. That is, we list the information that we know. We list the information given, and the first information that we are given is this amount, the principal, which is $3,000. We have listed it. The second one is the rate. This rate is 12%, and we agreed that it is good that we express our rate as a fraction or a decimal before we substitute the same in the simple interest formula, and this is the same as 12 out of 100. And lastly is the duration, which is the period denoted by the letter N, and this one is 2 years. Having written the information that we've been given, we need to write down the simple interest formula. We write down the simple interest formula, which is our guiding principle that will be applied in solving this question. And we said interest is equal to the product of the principal, the rate, and the period. And the last thing, having written down the formula, we substitute the values and evaluate. We substitute the values and evaluate. The interest will be equal to the principal, which is $3,000, multiplied by the rate, 12 out of 100. Lastly, we multiply by the duration, which is 2 And this will give us $720. So this is the interest that will accrue over a duration of 2 years. But the question was, what is the total amount owed after 2 years? The money that was borrowed is $3,000. So at the end of that lending period, how much does the borrower owe the person who gave out the money? So we need to get the sum. So the amount owed, this is the total. Total amount owed will be equal to the principal plus the interest accrued. And our principal is $3,000. And the interest accrued is $720, giving us a total of $3,720. This is the amount that is supposed to be repaid at the end of the second year. The second part of the question if repayments of the loan are made monthly, if repayments of the loan are made monthly, how much would each payment need to be? Simply the question is, how much will each installment be? When we are making monthly payments, the best term that we can use is installments. We make monthly installments. And remember, in our previous lesson, we had looked at how to convert from years to months and from months to years. We need to understand how many months are there in 2 years. 2 years is equal to how many months? And as you know, a single year has 12 months. So if we have 2 years, then we are going to have 12 times 2. This will give us 24 months. 24 months. That means that if this total amount is going to be paid monthly, we are going to have 24 installments or 24 payments. This question requires us to know the amount that will be paid in each installment. Each installment or we can call each payment, will be equal to the total amount owed so each installment or payment will be equal to the total amount that is owed, or the total amount that should be paid at the end of the duration, divided by the number of months or the number of payments to be made, and each payment will be equal to this particular amount all over the number of payments and this will give us $150 per month. So every month, the borrower will have to make an installment of $155. This is a simple example illustrating the simple interest concept. Let us get another one that is a bit complicated to gauge our deeper understanding of this concept. This second example, we have a shed manufacturer offers a shed manufacturer offers finance with a rate of 3.5% per annum paid at the end of 5 years. At the end of 5 years, with a deposit of 10% or a rate of 6.4% per annum repaid over 3 years with a deposit of 20%. So in this question, you will discover that we have two cases. This shed manufacturers offers finance in two cases. The first case is where they give you at a rate of 3.5 per annum, and the duration is 5 years. And the second case is where they give you at the rate of 6.4% and the duration is 3 years. The two cases have different deposits that should be made. The first case we have a deposit of 10%, and in the second case we have a deposit of 20%. Christine and Donald decided to purchase a fully erected shed for $12,500. Then follows the questions. The first part So we can go through the question once more, that a shed manufacturer offers finance with a rate of 3.5% per annum paid at the end of 5 years with a deposit of 10%. That is the first case. Or a rate of 6.4% per annum repaid over 3 years with a deposit of 20%. That is the second case. We have these two guys, Christine and Donald, who decided to purchase a fully erected shed that has a price tag of $12,500. The first part of the question is, how much deposit will they need to pay in each case? We want to know the deposits that should be made in both cases. The deposits that should be made in both cases. So we have case number 1. We can call it case 1. We have 3% per annum paid at the end of 5 years with a deposit of 10%. So the deposit in this first case is 10%. 10% of what? 10% of the selling price of the shed. 10% of 12,500. This deposit will be, for us to calculate 10% of this, we need to convert this to a fraction or a decimal before we proceed with multiplication by this number, so that we can get what does 10% represent. This will be 10 out of 100 multiplied by $12,500, and this will give us $1,250. If they decide to use the first case, they will have to part with a deposit of $1,250. The second case, we are told that one needs to make a deposit of 20%. The deposit is equal to 20% of the $12,500. This will be 20 out of 100 multiplied by $12,500, and this will give us $2,500. We are just trying to compare the two cases. So if we were the buyers and we assume that they also tried to make the comparisons before they settled on the mode of payment that they wanted, these comparisons will help them to determine the mode of payment that they will use. This one, they will be required to have just a deposit of $1,250, but in the second mode of payment, they will be required to have a deposit of $2,500. So it depends with the amount of money that they have. That amount of money will guide them when they are selecting the choice to use. That was the first part of the question. The second one, what is the total interest they will incur in each case? What is the total interest they will incur in each case? Now, there is something important that we ought to realize before we proceed with the calculations. That these interests are only calculated on the amount that remains after a deposit has been made. the interest will be charged, or the interest will accrue on the amount that remains after the installment has been made. So for us to calculate the interest, we need to subtract the deposit first. The amount that will remain is the one that we are going to use as the principal. And remember, we have two cases. So each case is going to have a different amount or a different principal based on the deposit that was made. Should not include the deposits. So we subtract the deposits before we consider the two cases. We will still start by looking at our first case. How much will be the principal? And we are saying the principal will be equal to the price, the selling price of the shed, a fully erected shed, minus the deposit that was made. And this will be $12,500 minus the, in the first case, the deposit was $1,250. This will give us a principal of $11,250. So this is what we are going to use as the principal. You subtract the deposit first. What remains is the amount that should be used to calculate the interest. And now that we have the principal in the first case, we should also list down the rate. And the rate is 3.5% per year. And it is important that we express this rate as a fraction or a decimal, which will be 3.5 out of 100. And we should also look at the duration or the period. And in the first case, the duration is 5 years. The duration is 5 years. This will mean that our interest, which is the product of the principal, the rate, and the duration, will give us, we substitute in the values, the principal is 11,250. The rates are at 3.5 out of 100. And the period is 5 years. In the first case, we will get an interest amounting to the tune of $1968.75. This will be the interest that will be accrued at a rate of 3.5% over a period of 5 years. Let us look at the second case. And the second case, we need to calculate the principal, and this principal we are saying will be the difference between the selling price, which is $12,500, minus the deposit. The deposit in the first case was a bit low, just $1,250, but in the second case, the deposit was double this, which is $2,500. And this gave us 10,000. 10,000 as the principal. The rates were at 6.4%, which is the same as 6.4 out of 100. And the duration was 3 years. The duration was 3 years. So when we move on, we need to write down our simple interest formula. We should always do that so that it will help us, whether we have identified all the provided information that we need to substitute into this formula before we proceed with calculations. And this interest will be equal to $10,000 multiplied by 6.4 out of 100 multiplied by 3 years, giving us an interest equivalent to $1,920. So as we move on with these calculations from the first part, the second part, and onwards, you will discover that these calculations will always guide us to determine the case that should be considered when making repayments. In the first case, we have the interest accrued as $1,968.75, and in the second case, we just have $1,920. So there is a difference of around 48 point. If you take this minus this, you'll get a difference of about $48.75. That if you did make your payments using the first case, you will have spent more. And if you consider the second case, you will have saved some $48.75. But that comparison, we can make it much later. Let us look at the third part of this question. The third part, part C, if they decide to pay per month, what would be their monthly repayments? What will be their monthly repayments? We've not been told the case that they considered to make the repayments. We are still analyzing the two cases. So we'll still try to look at the two cases separately. If they did use the first case or the second case, what will be the amount to be paid in each month? In the first case, the amount to be paid, total amount repaid, should be equal to the sum of the principal amount plus the interest in that case. And the principal in the first case was $11,250, and the interest accrued was $1,968.75. So giving us a total amount that should be repaid of $13,250. 218.75. This is the total amount that should be repaid. The duration, the period, in the first case, the period was 5 years. We need to convert this into the equivalent number of months through which the repayments will be made, and this will be the same as 5 multiplied by 12, giving us 60 months. Now, these 60 months are equivalent to the number of repayments that will be made. So we want to know how much will be each repayment. As we have learned, each repayment will be equal to the total amount to be repaid all over the number of repayments all over the total number of repayments, and the total amount we are having is 13,218.75. We divide this by 60 repayments or 60 months, and this will give us 220.31 dollars. This is to 2 decimal places. That if we consider the first case, they will have to make a repayment of $220.31 dollars each month or per month. And in the second case, the total amount will be equal to the sum of the principal, in this case, plus the interest, and the principal is $10,000 and the interest accrued is just 1,920, giving us an amount of $11,920. $11,920. The duration in this case is 3 years, and this is the same as 3 times 12, giving us 36 months. 36 months. So each repayment or installment will be equal to the total amount, which is $11,920 divided by 36 repayments, giving us $331.11 dollars. This is also rounded off to 2 decimal places. So these are the two scenarios we have. If you consider the first case, if they were to use the first case to purchase the fully erected shed, they'll have spent this amount as installments every month. And if they considered the second case, this is the amount they should make. And what brings about this difference? Because you discover that in the first case, the installment is a bit low compared to the second case. Your guess is as good as mine. This is brought about by the variations in the periods. In the first case, the period is long, so you'll pay smaller amounts in installments before you meet that target of the total amount that should be repaid. And in the second case, you discover that the period is small, just 3 years, 36 months. So you need to have a larger installment for you to cover the same amount within the limited time. That is the difference between the two amounts of installments that we are having. Okay, we have considered the two cases. We now want to move on to the fourth part of this question. The fourth part, we are asked if they were to make cash payments, how much would they have saved in each case? And I remember in our previous lessons, when we were looking at budgeting, making the two types of budgets, that is using percentages and using fixed amounts, we said, or we learned that it is good for us to make some savings. And we also said that savings helps us to buy non-essential goods or for personal development. So this question is actually taking us back to that to the lesson of that day, that if the Christine and Donald, if they had already saved some money and they decide to make a cash payment instead of installments, how much will they save? Remember, cash payments will not attract any interest. So the savings in the two cases will basically be the interests that have accrued. Let us consider the two cases again. In the first case, the interest that has accrued is $1,968.75. And in the second case, we have just calculated this. The interest is $1,920. These are the savings that will be made in case they went for cash payment. So in the first case, if they were if they had chosen the first case and changed their mind to make a cash payment, this could have been their saving. And in the second case, the savings should have amounted to $1,920. So I will still insist that savings are very important, because if you make cash payments in this case, you will still have some money to continue saving, or you can use the same to buy some other things. That is the last bit of that question. We now move on to look at one last example on the same. Under hire purchase, John bought a new car for $11,500. He paid no deposit. Decided to pay the loan in 7 years. In 7 years. If the simple interest was at 6.4% per year, determine a total interest paid We have a person by the name John who decided to buy a new car. This car has a price tag of $11,500 if you pay in cash. John did not pay any installment, but decided to pay the loan in 7 years. If the simple interest was at 6.4% per year, the first part of the question is for us to determine the interest. And as a tradition, we need to list down the provided information together with the simple interest formula before we proceed with substituting in the values that we have, and then we evaluate to get the simple interest. The principal is $11,500. The duration or the period is 7 years, and the rate, the simple interest rate of repayment, is at 6.4% per year, which is equivalent to 6.4 out of 100 expressed as a fraction. And the simple interest formula says that the interest is equal to the principal multiplied by the rate and the period, and this will give us $11,500 multiplied by multiplied by 6.4 out of 100 multiplied by 7. When we carry out that calculation, we will get an interest of $5,152. This is the total interest that will be accrued over a period of 7 years. The second part of this question is for us to calculate the amount of money that should be repaid. Part B, we are supposed to determine how much is to be repaid. How much is to be repaid? And this amount to be repaid is basically the sum of the principal amount and the interest that have been accrued over the stated period of time. Is the sum of the principal and the interest accrued, and our principal is $11,500. The interest accrued is $5,152, and this will give us a sum of $16,652. You will discover that if John was to pay in cash, he was supposed to pay $11,500. But since he's going to pay in installments, that is hire purchase mode of payment, he is going to pay a bit more. So if he was to pay in cash, he would have saved this interest. He would have saved $5,152. So this is the total amount that should be repaid. And lastly, we determine the payment per month. Remember the question, we were told that John did not make any deposit. He just decided he's going to pay that total amount in installments within a duration of 7 years. So we need to know how much will be each payment per month. Remember, 7 years is equal to 7 multiplied by 12, and this will give us 84 months. This 84 months means that we are going to have 84 payments or 84 installments. So for us to get each payment, or what can also be called installment, each installment will be equal to the total amount to be repaid divided by the number of installments or the number of payments. The number of payments, and our total amount is $16,652. The total number of payments are 84. And this will give us an installment of $198.24 per month. So the first month, John will be required to make an installment of $198.24. The second month, the third, up to the last month, for him to clear that debt of $16,655. So having looked at the two modes of payment, the cash payment and the hire purchase mode of payment, and having also looked at the difference between the two, you will discover that cash payment is the best mode of payment that each and every one of us would have wished to use. But sometimes we are faced with a situation whereby we want to buy something but we don't have cash. So we resort to using the second mode of payment, that is the hire purchase, which is a bit higher compared to the first one that we've just mentioned. So we are encouraged to make savings, that if we have some savings, we can make payments without relying on the hire purchase mode of payment, which is a bit higher. I hope you have enjoyed my lesson, and I'm inviting you to my next lesson where we'll be looking at compound interest. We are through with simple interest, and in our next lesson we will be looking at compound interest. Thank you and welcome.